Amanda.
Clay.
Do you like scary movies?
Yeah, I think I do. Do you like scary movies?
I do, and I think a lot of other people do too, and we cover a lot on our show, but there are a lot that I think people are fans of that we don't cover, like, say, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, the Dream Master, or whatever.
All of the Halloween franchise?
All of the Halloween, minus 2 of them, I guess. But we want to change that because Halloween is approaching. It's a very spooky time. We want to give you more horror movie content. So what we'd like to do is on Patreon, we would like to start covering these franchise movies one by one so we can really dig into, the worst that horror movies have to offer instead of the best. But in order to do that, we have to hit a certain level of fundraising on our Patreon, which you can help us do. So if you like what you hear on Rotten Horror Picture Show, you can head over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile and sign up. And if we reach our goal, then we'll be bringing you more horror movie coverage, and you'll also get access to all the other stuff we do at the Pensky File, which includes other sci-fi film reviews, Star Trek rewatches, content consumption discussions, and so many other things. I don't know how we have time to do any of this.
It's a lot. It's a lot of material.
It really is, and I don't have a job currently. Even more reason for you to sign up for the Patreon. So if you'd like to do that, Amanda and I would love to bring you some more horror movie content. So thank you guys, and happy early Halloween.
Spooky Halloween.
Hey everyone, welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about movies off of Rotten Tomatoes' 200 Greatest Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me as always is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing?
I am pretty good. How are you, Clay?
Good. This is our landmark 20th episode.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and since it's
God.
a multiple of 5. We're going off of our main list to do a movie that's not on the list, one of our wild card picks. And this week we're doing a movie you chose, which is 2016's The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yes.
So this actually has an 87% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's actually higher than a lot of movies that are on the list. I feel like we run into that quite a bit, but their rating system continues to baffle me. But what is it about this one that made you choose it?
Well, first of all, I do think this is a very underrated movie. Like, I think it's a pretty legitimately scary movie. Like, it has its flaws, but I really like a lot of elements of it. And yeah, I think it does the sort of thing that I really like, which is a sort of smaller cast, not a shit ton of exposition, and just sort of a very self-contained story.
Definitely.
And that's sort of my jam.
How did you first come across it?
I think it was just like a Netflix recommendation for me a while back. And I had never heard of it before, and something about it intrigued me, and then I started watching it one night by myself, and it scared the shit out of me. So it kind of quickly shot up to I have a higher regard for it than a lot of other horror movies, because there are parts of this that actually freaked me out the first time I watched it.
Well, that's the dragon we're all chasing, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's never the same when you rewatch it and you watch it again. But yeah, that first experience, like alone at night, it was it was great. I had to shut it off and
Yeah.
finish it the next day.
Excellent. Yeah, I had seen this once before, and I do think this is a good choice because though this isn't on that list, I do see this movie brought up a lot out in the world. Anytime I'm on Twitter and someone's like, I'm looking for a horror movie, someone recommends stuff, without fail, this always pops up at least one or two times. So it's a movie that didn't get a lot of press. I don't even know if it really if it came out in theaters. I don't remember seeing anything about it in theaters. I only know it from streaming.
Yeah, I don't think it did. I don't think it had like a major theatrical release. I think it did some of the festival circuit, but that was about it.
Yeah, I think it might have been like a Sundance movie or one of those things, or Toronto or something.
Sure, one of those places.
Yeah. But yeah, I saw it based on word of mouth, and I also enjoyed it. I have some squibbles. I don't know. I got some issues.
I think quibbles is the word,
yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, quabbles.
Quabbles.
But yeah, overall, I think for a we were talking last night, and I was saying that I feel like this movie kind of has a similar energy to it, to like Starry Eyes. And I feel like it kind of falls under that umbrella of like, oh, this is one that kind of went under the radar, but a lot of people recommend or should recommend because it does. It's kind of, you don't expect it to be as solid as it is, because whether or not it's just a streaming thing or something, it is an underrated movie that I think benefits from the word of mouth.
Absolutely. And I think given that it is a relatively low budget and sort of not a major major studio release, like given those things, that what it's able to do with the resources it has is pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, we'll take a quick break, play the trailer, and then we will get into it.
This is not what I was expecting. Can I see one?
No.
What's that for?
Make sure he's dead.
Sheriff, what happened?
No ID, no fingerprints in the system.
For now, she's a Jane Doe.
He needs my help right now. 11 o'clock, I'm all yours. Subject is in her mid to late 20s. Hair brown.
Flash flood warning now.
Eyes gray.
What happened to you?
First, they bound her. Then they ripped out her tongue, poisoned her, paralyzed her, forced her to swallow the cloth. What is that? Dad?
No one could see what we have seen.
All right, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, directed by André Øvredal. I probably murdered that, but I believe he's Norwegian or Swedish or something. He did another movie called Troll Hunter, which I've seen, which is pretty fun. Written by Ian Goldberg and Richard Nang, starring Brian Cox, Emile Hirsch, Ophelia Lovibond, and every naked inch of Olwen Kelly. Amanda,
Jesus.
what happens in this movie?
You're going to love this summary. Are you ready?
Yes. Is it like 2
Okay.
sentences?
Close.
Okay.
It's one.
Oh, excellent. Even better.
When father and son coroners investigate the death of a beautiful Jane Doe, they find increasingly bizarre clues.
Okay.
Yeah? I mean, it's not wrong.
It's not wrong. It
It's
is
just maybe leaving out one or two things.
It is about as vague as the some of the story elements in the movie, so maybe it's just on the same page as that.
I do love that it works in the fact that said Jane Doe is beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean you have to.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean no one wants to see the autopsy of ugly Jane Doe.
Mediocre looking Jane
Yeah.
Doe.
No.
Average American body type Jane Doe.
No. I mean she's an alive like 7, but she's a dead 10. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, come on. That was horrible.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're going to hell for that one. Things we will find in this movie include intense morgue-based hazing, sinus flies,
The worst.
the worst kind of flies, extreme sub-dermal tattooing,
Which is probably going to become popular, I think, very soon.
I mean, why not? And I'm going to put this one in quotes because it's not mine. Shitty cats getting what they deserve.
That's all Brian. That's not me either. That's just what I pulled from Brian Cox and his.
Oh, that poor cat.
Yeah.
And then, as is tradition, questionable parenting.
Yeah, bit of a stretch, but I don't know. I'd say that there's some that conversation they have in the elevator definitely smacks of questionable parenting. So
Yeah, and said morgue-based hazing that happens to the poor
That's
girlfriend.
true.
Like,
Yeah.
that's not cool, Dad.
yeah. But yeah, so this movie I think has a fantastic premise.
Yes.
And the first half of it I think is really, really great. The finding the body in a house full of people who have been killed in horrible ways, and the coroner is like, yeah, it looks like they were trying to escape. There was nobody breaking in, is a great setup. The bringing the body to the morgue and having it be such a mystery is great. And, you know, in autopsies are always fun in movies because it's like solving a puzzle inside a person, you know.
Yeah.
And they do a really great job with it, with the stuff that they find inside and whatnot. Where this one kind of falls apart for me is once they leave the autopsy room for the first time, and it's not that it's bad, because it's not, because I think the gags and stuff that they do are a lot of fun. It just feels like they are a little bit... they don't feel of the story, if that makes sense. They just kind of feel like gags they could do in a morgue. Because I think it takes so long for you to find out what's going on that I don't know if the walking around corpses and stuff really add to the whole premise, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I watch this, especially like when I've watched it on repeat watches, like after the first watch through, I've kind of wondered to myself, did the writers come up with these kind of moments, and did they just come up with them separate from the main storyline, and we're sort of like, oh no, that's so great, we have to do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it feels like they had a really cool idea. Like you said, like they had a great idea of a thing they could do in the morgue and with that setting, and they did it because it was a great set piece and a great moment in a morgue, rather than because it fits with the story.
You know what it actually really feels like? It feels like something that started as a short film and then they expanded it out into a feature, because the short film, it feels like the short film would have been all of the stuff on the two ends of the movie that take place in the morgue, because I mean that's a perfect setup for a short film. You got the two guys trying to figure out what's going on with this body. Turns out to be some sort of witch thing, and then they get killed or whatever. It's just when you have to expand it from 45 minutes or whatever to 90 minutes, and you got to figure out what to put in that extra time, that extra 45 minutes. It feels a little bit like you're saying, it's they just sort of toss some stuff in there. That being said, I think the stuff that they do is pretty good.
Yeah. No, I so to back up a little bit, like to go back to sort of the beginning of this movie, you get the scene where the sheriff and the deputies are in the house where these people have been murdered, and you get no explanation behind really what happened to them or why. And then they go down and they find Jane Doe, the body, half buried in the basement, in the dirt floor of a basement. And then it sort of cuts from there to the father and son coroner and medical examiner team, and they're doing an autopsy of a burnt body, kind of set to like a kind of rock song or something.
Yes, yeah.
And it's this very interesting. I had to think about it a couple times if I liked it or not, and I decided that I did, because I think it does this really interesting thing right off the bat where it sort of puts you in the position that I'm blanking on like their names. There's Tommy and then the sons.
Let's back up for a second. Amanda's blanking on the character names. Oh yeah, you didn't remember
I know, and
that,
there's only like two characters.
You didn't remember that Emile Hirsch plays Austin Tilden and Brian Cox plays Tommy Tilden?
I said Tommy. I got Tommy. I didn't get Austin.
Hold on a second. You have to say bye to your credibility. It's leaving.
Wait, I had credibility? Oh, shit. Didn't even know. But yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like by setting it to sort of like rock music and making it this almost like montage moment of the two of them like digging into this guy. It puts the audience kind of in their frame of mind where they really do just treat this as a job. Sure. And it kind of creates like there's a term I've heard thrown around about like in terms of writing with like narrative voice, something called psychic distance, which is like how close or far away emotionally are you allowing your narrator to be from the action. And I think establishing it this way kind of creates that initial psychic distance where it's like, it's just a job. It's just something that has to get done. They don't play it super gory. It's not really played for like jump scares or like gross out moments or anything. It's kind of very clinical and very like methodical, and then they're sort of done with it. And I like that as like an establishing scene because it lulls you into a false sense of like calm and like control.
Sure, yeah. It presents something that on the surface would be generally presented as very scary, as kind of taking the mystery away from it. So when they are presented with something that is mysterious, to have those two be legitimately stumped by it, it kind of gets you into it even more.
Right. Yeah.
And what I do like about that setup as well, which is also kind of what doesn't work for me, or I guess what I wish they'd handled differently, is they set the two of them up as sort of like approaching it from different angles, where Tommy is very much only about the how, of the person dying. That's what he's there for. We're not here to speculate. We're just here to figure out what the cause of death is. Mm-hmm. Whereas Austin is a lot more interested in the why. Why would this person end up this way? Why did this person die this way? So they have that sort of clash between them. They're two different personalities. And I kind of wish that they had played that up more, going through some of the more personal stuff. Because they don't seem to have a bad relationship. It seems to be, it's strained not because they themselves don't like each other, but clearly, as they talk about later, the mother had died, and so he's all alone, and Austin doesn't want to follow in his footsteps, and blah blah blah. So there is some tension there, but they like each other. So having this difference of approach introduced, I think, is a good way to kind of get a sort of, it's sort of like a localized Mulder and Scully effect, where Tommy is very much a Scully and Austin is very much a Mulder, but I don't think that they go as far as they could with it, because it brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, not just applicable to this movie, but I think applicable to any horror movie. How long should people go, provided you are in a situation that is on the surface normal and then an abnormal element is introduced? How long should people go denying the supernatural element? Because in this movie, they are on board very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely something I was gonna kind of talk about too, is that there's this moment, I think we commented on it a little bit when we were kind of chatting about the movie the other night, where, it just seems like real fast that they're both sort of on board with the, like, oh, she must have been tried as a witch in 1693, and this is a whole thing.
Because you've got Tommy, who is the guy who doesn't care about the why, he just wants to know the how, and it always comes down to something real world explainable. This is what killed him. And so once all this crazy stuff starts happening, even he very quickly is like, well, she seems like she's some sort of a ghost who has it out for us. We should probably, he goes over to that side very quickly.
He does, especially for somebody who I'm pretty sure early in the movie, in the first like half an hour maybe, he says something to Austin that was pretty much like, well, when you're down here, if you can't see it, feel it, or document it, then it's not real.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And for a character like that, who seems so grounded in like the material world, and somebody who draws his conclusions off of like physical evidence, for him to sort of jump straight, like fully 100% willing into the like, yep, witch ghost, this is happening. It is a little like I think that's the thing with this movie. One of the weak points of it is that the characters feel a little thin at times. I think, Tommy, having Brian Cox in that role does a lot of the heavy lifting of that character.
Oh, absolutely. He does like 98% of the heavy lifting of that character.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like any slightly lesser actor in that role, you would just, it would fall way more flat. Some of the dialogue is very ham-handed and like ham-fisted, kind of like trite moments,
sure.
but I think that there's like a dissonance there with having him get on board that fast. But I don't know at what point I would have said was the time for him to do so. Maybe they would have been needed to have been physically menaced a little bit more.
Well, I on the one hand, I find it a kind of refreshing, because usually it takes a long time for those characters to come around if they come around at all. Like there's in the first, definitely the first 2 seasons of the X-Files, it almost becomes a joke how Scully doesn't believe and always walks in like 2 seconds after the supernatural stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's like Mulder's being choked to death by a ghost, which he has to banish back to the Netherrealm using a book, and then right after that happens is when Scully gets into the house.
Right, or she's been like napping in the hotel room and he's like gone to get the ice and is getting like menaced by something.
And so it's a little refreshing to see characters kind of get on board quickly. Like one of the things that I always liked about the Hammer films, the Hammer horror films of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, is everybody in those movies is aware that vampires exist. Like they don't even have to really question it. Like if something happens, they turn the head to the side, there's 2 holes in the neck, and they're like, well, it's vampires. So it exists in a world where you don't have to rehash the stuff, and it doesn't become like part of your story that who believes and who doesn't and blah, blah, blah. However, with a story like this, I feel like it's so small, and this really feels like it wants to be a character study of more than anything. It feels like the larger theme is this relationship between the dad and the son. And I feel like you can have that skepticism work as a character trait that's an inroad to whatever this larger conversation is going to be, because you have these two that are going in completely different directions as far as, you know, what they're looking at and where they're going in life and whatnot. And so taking that off the board so soon feels like you are leaving some meaty character stuff on the table, I think.
Absolutely. I think especially given that the wife/mother has died.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you position Tommy as a skeptic, as somebody who's very much like, the material world and the reality around us is all there is, it's all we have, and then we die, and that's it. If that's like his belief system, then losing his wife is, you know, even more devastating than if he were a religious person, because he's not thinking, I'm going to see her again in the afterlife, or she's like happy in heaven or what have you. Like, it's really fully, she's gone. And
he's built to be that kind of character because he deals with death every day, and because he deals with it in such a clinical fashion that there's no romance to death for this guy. And even after when he has to kill the cat, I think he say something to the effect of that cat was the only thing I had left of your mother, or something like that.
Yeah, I think he says like that. Like as much of a pain in the ass as that cat was, it was one of the few things I had left of her, or something like that.
So it's like it's he has no illusions about this romance of the afterlife and whatnot. And then you have him presented with a very supernatural element that is it's not confirming an afterlife, but I mean it's kind of is. I don't know what it is.
I mean it's confirming the possibility of an afterlife, which seems like much more than he ever expected to experience.
Right.
So you would think there would be some sort of, like, I was kind of hoping for it, because there's that moment where he sort of decides to give himself to this malevolent being, whether she's a witch or something else. And I was kind of expecting it to be like for there to be a moment where he's sort of like, you know, if your presence is still here, that means like that we do go on after death, and you can take me and I'll be happy, because then there's a chance I get to see my wife again. And they kind of never really bring it together. I don't know if it's supposed to be implied in that moment. It doesn't feel that way to me.
I could
it just
see
feels
them,
like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I could see them playing that card and then turning it on him anyway, because this is not a happy ending movie. Everybody in this movie dies. No. And so I could see them playing that scene as him being like, it's okay, there's this, I've been shown proof that there's the afterlife or something. I'm going to go be with your mother. And then it's like, no, you're just going to get murdered by a ghost, and then the ghost is going to kill your son. You know, it can still lean into that cynicism that runs through the whole thing. Yeah,
if anything, it can deepen it by almost giving this character something and then taking it away.
Yeah, I mean, that's like that.
That might be too brutal.
Yeah, I was going to say I find something satisfying, but also incredibly, incredibly dark, even darker than the setup as it stands.
I know we're pushing an autopsy movie to be darker.
Yeah. To go from there to dangling the hope of an afterlife in front of this one character, and then pulling away, going like, nope, that's not real. You're just dead. That's quite a downer.
I mean, but that is essentially what happens.
True.
Though.
Yes.
It's just not stated as explicitly as we're doing.
And kind of jumping off from that a little bit. We've talked about up to this point how you and I both kind of gravitate towards minimal exposition, minimal detail kind of stories that sort of just live in the story that's being told and don't rely too much on backstory and exposition and long-winded blah blah blah. Just kind of they do what they're going to do, they do it well, and they get out. I feel like this is an example of too minimal, because I don't think the character stuff they do give you is substantial enough to really stick. The first thing that I don't think totally works is they have this setup, which is great. Again, all the setup is great, of Austin talking with his girlfriend. Clearly he's going to leave, and he doesn't know how to tell his dad that he doesn't want to do this anymore. But I don't think that ever comes up again. Do they ever have that conversation?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's weird to me that never comes up. It's even in the elevator when they're having that conversation, it never comes up. Like it doesn't even come up. I feel like it would come up right before the weird stuff starts happening. So it's like you have that moment where, okay, they're even further apart now, and now they've got to go do this autopsy on this body that turns out to be really weird, you know? And that speaking of that elevator scene, it's just like I don't think there's enough going on there that has been explored for this scene to really work for me, because they're talking still even here in fairly vague terms about the death of this mother, and Tommy is talking fairly vaguely about the pressures that he put onto the son and stuff, and it kind of it just all kind of sits in the periphery of really landing in a character sense, that it just never really that scene feels like it should be this big all the characters laying everything that's been under the going on under the surface. It's all being laid out on the table here. This is what the emotions are. This is what they're feeling. And it doesn't feel that way to me because it sort of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of the problem is that like you were saying earlier, these two characters, this father and son pair, they like each other. Like they might not see eye to eye on everything, but most of the interactions we even see between the two of them are neutral to positive.
Right.
Like there's not a lot of like
even
we
when
get
he
this
scares
hint.
the shit out of his girlfriend, he's not really that mad about it.
Right, exactly. Like yeah, and that I keep coming back like mentally to that scene, and like to the whole like role of the girlfriend and all of this. But just to like before I get onto her, to finish my initial thought, just like I wonder if they didn't kind of show more of a tension between the two of them when they're actually interacting, not just in that kind of side conversation
exactly
Austin has with the girlfriend. Like if there would be sort of more of a catharsis during the elevator scene when Tommy kind of almost does his sort of like apology, like mea culpa kind of talk. And it's also strange because I don't know how old Austin is supposed to be in this.
Right.
I'm
I was
assuming
having
in
trouble
his-
figuring that out too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he seems young enough, but also like post high school.
Yeah.
You know, like 22, 23, 24.
Yeah, he's old enough. I kind of feel like part of that is Emile Hirsch just looking very young.
Yeah.
But he's old enough. He's old enough that he is the second on an autopsy. So he has enough schooling behind him that he can deal with that, but he's young enough to still be living with his dad and sort of struggling with the following in his father's footsteps story. So it's kind of hard, to pin down exactly what it is. I'm surprised. I don't think I would have liked this if they added it, but it feels like the kind of scene that's missing is him with his girlfriend, the girlfriend being like, you didn't go to 4 years of medical school just so you could cut up dead bodies in your parents' basement. You know, and he's like, I know, I got to talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like you've got setting up this idea that the mother died, the father needs help, so the son came home. And the son doesn't want to be here, and he thinks there's enough time that's gone by. But that's all that stuff that I'm talking about that's like on the periphery that they don't really get into, so it's hard to really ground exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, an easier way to sort of do that would have been having the girlfriend, she's coming to visit from New York City.
Mm.
You know, like they met in college, and now he's back with the dad since the mom has died. And so he's been long distance with his girlfriend. Like, you could kind of do something like that would imply that he had moved away at one point and he had come back.
Because she seems very much like a townie girlfriend. Like, it seems like he's when he's done working with his dad, they're going to go to the drive-in or something. Like she doesn't. Which I mean, it's not a bad thing or anything, but it doesn't present that distance that I think the character needs.
Right. And it adds to the sort of mystery of like exactly how old are they?
Right,
Like how old is this couple? Are they 19? Are they 25? Like there's a big difference between those two.
Like if they were, actually what would have been a nice way to handle that is if when they start the autopsy on Jane Doe, when he's doing the recording, when he's saying who's doing it, and he says, I'll be attended by Austin Tilden, and then Austin very kind of curtly says, that's Dr. Austin Tilden. You know what I mean? Like something to imply that he has more medical training than necessary, and he's here as a favor.
Yeah, that would add an interesting layer to it, because then even if he did or said nothing else, you could like read a little bit of resentment into that.
Right. And, you know, what you were saying about the elevator scene, he's apologizing, and I think that's the thing. It's like I don't exactly know what he's apologizing for.
Yeah.
And I think that's the meat that's missing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like not enough. It's sort of, this movie tries to introduce some conflict by having Austin have this girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
But the girlfriend is kind of she's written like we're talking about how some of the characters in this movie are a little thin.
Sure.
Her character is extremely thin.
Oh yeah.
Like
so thin. This is a joke setup. So thin that she could fit right through the crack of a door to get downstairs. I don't know how she got downstairs because they couldn't figure out a way to get out. How did she get back into the house if the only way they could get out was the elevator?
I have no idea.
Anyway, that was a long way to go for a ham sandwich. Continue.
I thought you were going to say she's so thin it's almost like she's been wearing a corset for 400 years.
No, I wouldn't objectify her like that.
Well, come on. They make the comment about the Jane Doe's waist. Anyway.
It's not all looks, Amanda. Jesus.
Look, about this beautiful corpse, it absolutely is. Like we said, if she was mediocre looking Jane Doe,
That's
it
true,
would not
yes.
be as interesting a movie. No, but with the girlfriend, she comes in and she's kind of this like peppy, a little bit of like a firecracker. Like she sneaks up on him and she scares him and she's all like mischievous about it. And then she's like, "Oh, I'm just taking a look around," and like waltzing through the morgue and insists on going into the autopsy room and insists on looking at one of the corpses, which is like, I think a fairly like inappropriate and like borderline unethical thing to do.
It was inappropriate at the one end, possibly illegal at the 10 end.
Right, and even just beyond like legality, if you're thinking about like your loved one's body, you don't want like the medical examiner's like girlfriend to just be able to come in and be like, "Oh, gross."
Right.
But she turns really quickly from this sort of like kind of like inappropriately into it, like a little too into the morgue and a little too into the bodies. And then the minute they sort of prank her by ringing the ankle bell, she's just like, "Oh, I can't believe you."
Right. Yeah.
And it's just very like, I don't know, like it just seemed, I don't know, that just seemed like very cliche almost, like girlfriend is upset or annoyed with you no matter what you do. I don't know.
Yeah,
just bothered me.
Her character is uneven, to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, she's almost not on screen long enough to be uneven, because she's got, I think, like 2 scenes and then she gets axed to death by accident.
Yeah. One of the scenes is her getting axed to death.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like, especially in a movie like this where you've got where it's so lean as far as characters and so lean as far as plot, I feel like a character like her needs to be that much sharper.
Right.
So her appearance serves a very specific purpose. And whether that's to get across what the Austin's relationship with his dad is, or to get across what's going on in the autopsy room to some extent, I think she needs to be that much more clear as to what her purpose is.
Yeah. Have introducing this extra character into the environment and into the story has to serve a really direct purpose that like you're saying is very clear, and I think it just they muddy it a little bit too much with her.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I honestly do you think it adds anything to have her come back? It's just another body, you know. I don't find her death to be particularly, at least story-wise, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I guess she's there, so she just seems like someone who's there to get killed at a certain later in the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, it's interesting that we get, if I'm remembering the order correctly, we get Tommy's apology to Austin pretty much right before he axes her.
That's right. He apologizes, and then he kills his girlfriend.
Right. And so it's kind of weird where it's like, if you're trying to set up a conflict between these two characters and something that one of them needs to feel bad about, there you go.
Right.
Like,
like
you didn't really need to bring the whole, like, well, your mom died and I put a lot of pressure on you. Like, no, it could have just been, wait 5 minutes and then have it be, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I killed your girlfriend."
Yeah, and even after that, like after he kills her, they kind of both move past that pretty quick. Like, Austin has his dramatic scene where he, holds her and screams or whatever. But then after that, it doesn't really come up again. I mean, arguably, yes, they have bigger fish to fry at that point when you've got a witch demon in your autopsy room.
Yeah, but
trying to do something about revenge. But it just seems like such a it just feels like a manufactured plot beat to have the girlfriend come back and get killed.
It does, and I think part of it is that, like, I think a couple of the, like, overarching themes of this movie are the concepts of guilt and punishment. Like, who is guilty?
Sure.
Are they really guilty? Who deserves punishment? Does it matter if someone deserves punishment? Or is it enough that you're just able to mete it out on them?
Yeah. That's a good segue to move into talking about the body / monster itself. It is interesting that she is presented as this spirit of vengeance, so to speak. But she seems to mete out that vengeance on people who are, they're not exactly. It's not entirely dissimilar to, like, The Thing, in that the Tildens didn't do anything. I mean, they did something in the larger sense of like the history of men doing awful things to women, I guess. But it's
But
you know,
they don't
in
seem
a
to
larger
be
academic
personally-
sense. Yeah, but they themselves don't seem to have really. They're not bad people, and it's a thing where I find the monster to be very interesting in its setup, but I think its purpose is a little bit vague or a little bit unclear, or even the way it's meting out this vengeance seems kind of strange too. Like it all kind of falls under the same umbrella of, like, the middle part of the movie just feels like they're doing a bunch of scary stuff that doesn't really, because I don't know why she needs to summon dead bodies to track them down, other than to pay off the ankle bell gag, which is fantastic. That works really well.
Oh, yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
watched Picard, right?
Yes.
Did it drive you as insane as it drove Wes and I that they set up that thing on the Borg cube about having the green badge, and they're like, well, if the badge starts flashing green, you better watch out because that means that there's Borg coming, and they just never did anything with it.
Yep. I thought at least, not to derail totally, but I thought at least when, oh my god, when Seven, like, activates the Borg, that, like, something would happen with those, and nothing
No, they just
did.
suck them out into space. They don't have the
Yeah,
budget
fine.
for that. Yeah, anyway, but it's like, the point is, if you're going to set that up, you got to pay it off. And the ankle bell thing is set up very well, and it pays off very well. But yeah, what's your take on the witch monster vengeance spirit aspect of the whole thing?
Well, so I really like, I think we briefly mentioned this earlier. I like the fact that her body itself is sort of a map or like a puzzle of all of these different things. Like, I really like that element of, like, being able to, like, find these clues on her and in her body that tell you, like, what has happened to her, and like, that drops these weird sort of, like, I keep saying, like, these semi-esoteric hints and elements that are really interesting. And I find, like, I love that shit. Like, you know, they pull a weird cloth out of her, and it's got her own tooth inside of it, and it has symbols and Roman numerals all over it. I'm all about that weird kind of, like, just bizarre grotesquerie sort of stuff. But as much as I enjoy her backstory and the build up to realizing that she is probably a victim of witch trials hundreds of years ago. Oh, and also she's still somehow partially alive. Which I think all that's really well set up, where they find the paralytic agent in her system and all of these different things. The way she bleeds, like she's not dead. I think all of that builds really well. I even think those sort of, like, her general vengeance thing is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I want to be into it, but then, yeah, you get into the actual execution of it when she starts to have more of an effect on the environment. I really like the radio stuff. I like that she affects the radio. I was less into, like, oh, we're going to light her on fire and just, like, nothing's going to happen to her body.
Yeah.
It was like, but you could cut her open.
Right, that's a good point.
So I would have even enjoyed it if they had burned her and then they had realized after a minute that she was healing.
Sure, yeah.
Like something along those lines. But yeah, it gets kind of weird where there's this like Tommy decides that if he offers himself up in her place that she'll leave Austin alone, which doesn't.
I can just imagine her on the other side as he's being like, "Please, you can take me just as long as you leave him alone." And on the other side, her being like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, that's what I'll do. Yeah, come on, just come with me. He'll be perfectly fine. Don't worry about it."
I was totally going to kill both of you, regardless of what you said.
Yeah.
But this way, I get to do one real easy, and then only have to deal with one of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but her that sort of amorphous motivation of just like rage and therefore revenge. It's hard to get into it when her physical form is so inert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like Jane Doe is just laying there.
Right.
And then all this stuff is happening. Like she never communicates. She never really gets an opportunity to like state her own kind of case or her aims, or even if it's just something as simple as like, you'll all die or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just strikes me as weird.
Yeah. It's, I feel like, and this is kind of me armchair rewriting the movie a little bit, but
That's all we do.
I know. Yeah, it's fun. It's the most fun part. It almost feels like what this should be is, because it's tough to have a spirit of vengeance when there's no direct vengeance to need to be meted out, you know?
Yeah, like she's not even from the area.
Yeah, she's from like Swampscott or something. The Northeast.
Yeah, Danvers or whatever.
Yeah. See, the real Salem, which is technically, is it Danvers? I think is the real Salem.
I think it's Danvers. Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like what this should be is there is there's a schism between the father and the son, and Jane Doe, her presence starts drawing out the things between the two of them that need to be, so it's like it's more like they are going crazy. It's causing them to go crazy or something, as opposed to them just like running from ghosts, where her just being there puts this, for lack of a better term, spell on the two of them that causes them to kind of get darker and darker, and they start accusing each other of things and that kind of thing.
Which would go along well with the witch trials.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it would make the killing of the girlfriend feel a little less forced if there was more tension there, instead of just like, okay, stand back, I'm not going to look, I'm just going to indiscriminately swing this axe and hope that I hit the ghost. You know.
Also, I love you so much, son.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that stuff when I made you feel terrible when your mother was dying. Hold on, I got to do this thing real quick, then we can talk again.
I'm going to protect you. Yeah.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels like that should be what she does, more than literalizing these ghosts and this idea of her getting revenge for being falsely accused, or well, I guess accurately accused of being a witch, if we want to get technical about it. But you know what I mean?
Was she alive and a witch, or was she only a witch after she was
like
dead?
That's more part of where I feel like it almost feels like a short story or a short film, because it feels, the way that I'm describing it feels more like an episode of The Twilight Zone or something, where this element is introduced, which causes these two other people to the facade between them both to come down, and their worst impulses are amplified, and it ultimately causes their demise. And then it's just this spirit is moved on to the next place where it does the same thing. Having her get into the more supernaturally ghost stuff, it doesn't feel like it's really doing a lot for the story.
Which is too bad, because I think it could be reworked in a way that sort of did both. That had the sort of creepy ghost stuff and the bodies running around the morgue, but also played more into this sense of... I think what we're looking for is almost we want more of a sense of like tension and paranoia.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like one of my favorite gags in this movie is when the father is dead and Austin he thinks it's over. Like the lights are back to normal, the radio's playing normal music. He feels like everything is like he's alone and he's going to get out of here. And he goes up to the bulkhead doors for the basement and he hears what he thinks is the sheriff, Burke, like calling to him and encouraging him to come out. Right. And it's his voice. It's definitely his voice until, and then it starts singing the song that the ghost had playing over the radio. And it was like, I had this moment watching that the other night and I was like, wait a minute, if she can do that, if she can mimic the voices of other people, like how great would a gag have been if it was like the mother's voice?
Sure, yeah.
Somewhere else in the morgue, maybe even in sort of the crematorium section or something.
Yeah.
And it sent the father like
I'm
after
shocked.
her.
I'm shocked they didn't do something like that. Especially if this death of the mother is such a focal point of their relationship currently. I'm shocked that they didn't bring that back at all. Like I would much rather see that than the girlfriend get an axe in the head or whatever, Right.
Yeah. It would be more emotionally, it would have more of an emotional impact if it was the mother, because that seemed to be, at least what the movie was trying to set up as sort of the crux of the issues between Tommy and Austin, is this unresolved, unresolved grief.
Right, yeah. And it also, I feel like it does make the ending that much more dark if you have these two who get to this point where they are this tension that's been brought out between them and all this heated arguing or whatever it turns into, possible violence, has a moment of where it breaks and the father realizes what he has to do is like give himself over, and then he does that, he's dispatched, and then the other guy gets dispatched anyway. It does. Yeah. There's man, this could, there's so much potential here.
Yeah.
Speaking of that song, though, I think that song is really well used in the movie, and that bit where he goes up to the bulkhead or whatever, and the sheriff's voice goes from yelling down to turning into singing this. That works really well. I think that's a very effective bit.
Yeah, this movie. This movie is it's so frustrating in so many ways, because like we're saying, there's so many elements of it that are really great. There's so much room for it to be just like hit those sort of classic notes of a haunting, but also do something kind of different with them.
Yeah.
But even as it is, like flaws and all, like I think it's a movie that does a really great job of sort of settling you into this atmosphere.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Like once you're down in that morgue, you don't leave. Like really, you don't get a full tour of like all the different rooms, and like you don't get the whole layout. You just get the vibe that it's a few hallways and several different rooms, but you don't really know how they all connect. And it's very old and it's very dark, and you can't tell like day or night, and you might hear the thunder and the rain, but you can't see it. And it's such a creepy, it's such a great location and great atmosphere that I think that does a lot of the work of like setting the sort of eerie tone.
Yeah, they kind of do that thing that they do in Alien, where they set the atmosphere and also get you a little bit accustomed to the space by showing you these very just kind of shots of hallways, just shots of empty hallways, empty areas, just sort of give you an idea of what the space is like, but they're doing it in a way where it keeps the mystery of it up.
Yeah.
And it just goes to that, the whole beginning is just, the setup is so great, the atmosphere is really, really good. I do think, ultimately, my feeling is, ghost movies are very rarely, let's call this a ghost movie for sake of argument, ghost movies, haunting movies are very rarely just about the ghosts and the hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually used to amplify whatever character stuff is going on. And I think that's the biggest failing for me, is that it's like it's so close. It's so close to really nailing that. Because all of the other stuff is done so well. Like I said, even though I don't totally love what they narratively, the ghost stuff that they do in the middle, the actual things they're doing are pretty friggin' scary. Whether it's the bell, the bell on the foot, or the guy with his face blown off who's walking down, and they keep giving you like little bits of his face as he's coming down.
Yeah, just like a flash here and there.
Yeah, or the woman with her lips sewn shut who tears it open and like screams at the hole in the wall. That's really good. That's the execution is great, I think.
I have to say, I love that scene with the woman, the older woman's ghost who has the eyes and the lips sewn shut. When she's like, she's in the hole in the door and she's like screaming through her sewn shut mouth and like pulling at it. And I think like Austin looks through the hole and sees her, and then he like leans back, and then Tommy looks at Austin, and then he looks through the hole, and then he also leans back.
Yes.
And I love that it's not the like, what are you talking about? There's nothing out there. It's like,
right.
Oh,
it's
no,
like,
there's
nope,
something really fucked up out there. Yeah.
Yeah. That they don't do that enough in horror movies. It's so cliche to just do the, it's there and then it's not. It's so much scarier, right. I find, if you do, it's there. And then you go back, it's still there.
Right.
But I think it's really well done. I think, honestly, the stuff we're talking about as being failings of it does not stop it from being an enjoyable movie, Oh,
yeah. I mean, the things we're getting into are almost like, if you're the sort of person who listens to a podcast like this or makes a podcast like this, like you're gonna point these things out.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, if you're just looking for a movie to scare the shit out of your friends who watch horror movies sometimes but not always, this is a really good candidate.
Yeah, you could do a lot worse than this. We didn't even talk about the moment where they peel that layer of skin off and she's got the tattoos underneath. It's so great. All that stuff is fantastic.
Yeah, the autopsy stuff itself, like I appreciate the fact that, as much as the summary was like this beautiful Jane Doe, and we've kind of joked about it, like her body is never shot in a like romanticized or sexualized way. It's very like matter of fact. She's just there, and this is what needs to happen. It's not like shot to like titillate the audience or imply anything. It's very like clinical, as it should be. But yeah, all the stuff where they sort of are doing the Y incisions and like the rib cutters and all of that is pretty intense.
Yeah, and I maybe this is overthinking it too much, but like there's an element too where it's like her presentation is very much almost like a porcelain doll, sort of. Like her skin's very very white. She's perfect looking, essentially. And what they do is they just cut open and destroy this, beautiful body, and it is an
Right.
interesting. I think though it is kind of weird that they bring it up in that breakdown, I do think it's like part of the disarming nature of the story is,
Oh yeah.
what's the canvas here is not unpleasant to look at, let's put it that way, until they then tear it to pieces. So you're disarmed by this, beautiful woman who turns out to be some sort of, evil monster or whatever.
Right. And just sort of the theme that even though their intentions are not bad, like they're just doing their jobs, the violence they're inflicting on her body is still a form of violence. The same way, like, back in the witch trials, the people who were persecuting her for being a witch thought that they were doing the right thing. They also thought they were just doing their jobs.
I was just thinking that as you're saying it. I kind of feel like it's a missed beat to have Tommy in like his appeal to her be like, I'm sorry, I was just doing my job. Some because
Right.
saying that kind of, to have him say that, I feel like makes her vengeance factor a more towards them, at least, have a little bit more weight to it, because that
Right.
immediately, having him say that, given the situation and given what they've now figured out that she is, puts immediate context to why she would be so angry at these guys who are just doing their jobs the way they did either during the witch trials, or if you want to extrapolate it out, during the Holocaust, or any of these other many, many times where people's excuse for the horrible things that they did was, I'm just doing my job.
Yeah, and I think I would have enjoyed it, or I would have appreciated it, like, narratively, if they had tied that into maybe the mother's death. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe she was on life support. Maybe he did or did not do something and said, well, what else was I supposed to do? That was the only option. Or do you know what I mean? Like, the thing for me is the character of Tommy seems like one that is just so steeped in this sense of guilt. But he doesn't seem to have done much to really deserve that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I wish there was something just narratively or rhetorically that sort of highlighted a way in which he had failed or had a moral or ethical failing.
Right.
Even if we didn't agree as an audience that it was a failing, if he felt it was.
Yeah. Yeah, because
I don't know, just yeah.
Like I don't feel like, I guess, I think again this goes back to there being too minimal detail to really parse it out, but I don't feel like either of these guys go on much of a journey. Like they don't come away changed that much, like character wise. They're just sort of.
they don't come away at all.
No, but like there's. It's just there's just no real movement character wise for them in all of this stuff is just sort of happening to them.
Yeah, I understand. I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree. There's no like.
That's not super fair to me to say, because I mean, like I mentioned The Thing, and there's not a lot of character movement in The Thing either, but it's. I don't know. I think it's different in a movie like that where you've got 17 people who are all pointing fingers at each other versus a small, clearly condensed character study type movie that feels like it's just begging for more character work to be done.
Yeah, especially where, in The Thing, one of the elements I think we enjoy about that movie so much is that the creature, the thing itself, it doesn't really have a motivation.
Right.
It doesn't really have a specific like reason for doing the things that it's doing, except maybe an effort to escape.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this movie very clearly ascribes a background and a trauma and a motivation and a sense of revenge
Right.
to Jane Doe.
Yeah.
That I then think we're sort of searching for ways in which the movie then like fulfills that.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Yeah. So, like we said, this movie is not on the list currently, but it does have a 87%. Do you think Autopsy of Jane Doe deserves to be on the list?
I do. I really do, because I think, we're talking about the 200 best horror movies. This is much more of a horror movie than some of the other movies
Right.
that we've either already talked about or ones we have yet to hit on that are on this list.
Yeah.
And it's a genuinely scary movie. There are a lot of moments that are really good scares, and yeah, I feel like it should be on there before things like, I don't know.
American Psycho.
I can't come up. Yeah, I know. American Psycho is always my go-to.
We can't even use that anymore because it's gone.
I know, and
Because
it's gone.
the people listen to the show. That's why.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely think this should be on there. Maybe up near 200. I'm not saying this should be one of the top 100 best horror movies of all time, but yeah.
Yeah, just scrolling through the list, I feel like there's a lot of movies that kind of fall in the same kind of category as this, as far as like how well they're known, versus, because obviously we've said before, this has a lot of classics on it, but it's got stuff on it like Oculus, which was a movie that went under the radar pretty much. Southbound, which I think I haven't seen, but I believe it's like a New Zealand or Australian horror movie that I've seen. I've seen it on like Amazon Prime a million times. I haven't watched it yet, but it's just one of those ones where it's like, it probably falls in the same category as this, where I'm sure we're gonna watch it. I'm sure it's gonna be fine. Like it.
Yeah, well, like
I was just gonna say, Southbound actually has a lower rating than Autopsy of Jane Doe, but like Lights Out, I'm sure that's fine, but it's not something that I feel like is. I have a feeling I'm not going to think it's one of the 200 best horror movies ever made.
Yeah. Well, isn't Ready or Not on the list?
It is. Yes, it's very high actually.
And I love Ready or Not. I think it's a really, really fun movie. I don't think of it as a horror movie.
Right.
I don't know. Again, maybe we're getting too far into semantics. But like Oculus, for example. I've seen Oculus. I like Oculus. That's definitely very much in the horror movie, scary movie wheelhouse. I would swap that for this.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen Oculus, but I'm not going to disagree with you straight out, without watching it again, which we will eventually. But yeah, I feel like it's at least as good as Oculus.
Yeah. If Oculus gets
better,
to be on this list, so does Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I feel like so far we're 4 for 4 as far as putting movies on the list. But I assume that has nothing to do with the fact that we chose them personally, so we obviously clearly like them going in. But
right.
But yeah, that's. I think that's going to do it for our coverage of the Autopsy of Jane Doe. I'm going to hit the randomizer. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. And next time we will be doing a movie called Wreck, which is a Spanish zombie movie. Is it a zombie movie? I can't remember. I think.
I don't know. I'm very excited to see.
Oh, have you not
though.
seen Wreck?
I have not seen Wreck.
Okay, that's going to be fun.
I'm excited.
Yeah, Wreck is very highly recommended by most people who have seen it. Hey, that's what this is going to turn into. By the time we get to movie number 200, it's just going to be vaudeville jokes and puns.
I don't know if I'm going to make it that far then.
So we'll be doing Rec next time, number 144. So you can check that out. And if you like what you heard here, if you want to give us a rating or review on iTunes, that would be great. And if you're interested in Star Trek, another one of the podcasts we have under our umbrella is the Penske File, where Wes and I talk about, currently we're talking about Star Trek Enterprise and Lower Decks, which is the new Star Trek cartoon. Have you watched any of Lower Decks?
I have watched the first episode, maybe the first two.
What'd you think?
I'd be willing to give it a shot.
Yeah.
I'm not sold right away.
Yeah,
not
that's
straight
fair.
out the box. But.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of kind of conflicting opinions about it. I've actually been enjoying it quite a bit, and it's the Caitlin has actually been enjoying it quite a bit as well, which is interesting.
That makes sense to me.
But yeah, we have the Penske File, and we've got the Bat-Ass podcast, where it's myself and DC Comics artist Sean Murphy talking about Batman the Animated Series. Every episode we do 2 episodes of that, which we briefly talk about the episodes, and then we go on some tangent about drawing comics or something. But
Sounds awesome.
There's plenty of stuff out there if you want to take a listen to it. We've got a Patreon through the Penske File. If you want to throw us a couple bucks, that's cool too. Much appreciated. That's going to do it for us this time. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
And we will see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Clay here. Just wanted to let you know we called a bit of an audible because our next show will be our Halloween show. So instead of doing Rec, we're going to do Fright Night, number 110. At least it was 110 when we recorded it. Things have changed since then. But we thought Fright Night screamed Halloween a little bit more than Rec did. So, we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.